Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. My name's Andrew. So excited to have on our show this week Lester Godsey, who is the CISO of ASU, Arizona State University. Go Devils. And so glad to have you here on the channel, Lester. And I could rattle off your many previous positions as well, but predominantly CISO follows after a lot of the titles. So I want to go ahead and pass over to you for a quick, short introduction. Welcome on the channel.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Andrew. So, yeah, by way of introduction, yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. So, this is my third stint of being a CISO. I know this has been a previous talking point. I've always called it CISO for whatever reason, but yeah, it's all the same. And so, I have an interesting background in that this is my third stint being a CISO, but um, my first full-time security position I've ever held was CISO at City of Mesa, actually, which is very unusual. So the only other person I know with a similar background is Kim Jones, actually. And so, but yeah, so prior to that, but I've been in IT for 30 years. So all my professional experience, other than some side gigs and some consulting, has been in public sector here in the state of Arizona. So I actually started my career off in IT when I was wrapping up my music degree. And so I started as a student worker at ASU, transitioned to staff. So I was there between 94 and 2003. And then I took a 21-year break from higher ed and worked local government. So I ran IT for the town of Queen Creek. I was their first IT hire. So I built that department from
Oh,
scratch.
wow.
Yeah. So I was there when they stood up their first stoplight, when they formed their fire department and a bunch of other projects. And so I was there 7.5 years. I was at City of Mesa 9.5 years. The first 5 years as an IT manager, getting bounced around between different areas of responsibility. And that's when I made the formal jump into full-time security. So I was their interim CISO and then became their CISO. And I was in that role for about 4.5 years, then transitioned to Maricopa County, which was supposed to be my last public sector job. I was there for 5 years, where I was part of the team that helped that organization get through the 2020 and the 2024 presidential elections, which I know you have some familiarity with.
Indeed.
And yeah, and then I was supposed to retire last year from Arizona State Retirement, and then ASU made the offer, and I'm like, oh, what the heck? And so now I find myself back at Arizona State University.
Well, I'm sure they love to have you there, and we're so glad to have you here on the channel. And it's such an amazing, impressive background, and I'm excited to dig into this. So let's go ahead and get started. So with our first question, my personal favorite, kind of diving back in the kindergarten, first grade, second grade era days, is our teachers ask us, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And we give the answer of doctors, lawyers, baseball player, astronauts, veterinarians with a minor in psychology. But obviously, we broke into cybersecurity and we're pretty darn good at it. So, what was it that helped you or got you to break into cyber and get you interested into this field?
Well, that is kind of a apologies in advance to you and your audience. That's somewhat of a lengthy answer. So the thing I remember wanting to be when I was young was an architect. And so actually, I want to say my junior year of high school, I took 2 semesters of drafting. I did extremely well at it. I really enjoyed it. And this was before computers were common in the classroom for that, by the way. And then my senior year, my class schedule was kind of messed up. And so I was able to take architecture, but I had to kind of do it on my own. And for whatever reason, I don't know if it was me or what the deal was, but I really did not enjoy myself. And so I had every intention on majoring in architecture at ASU. ASU at the time, I'm sure it still is this way, had an excellent architecture program. And so my last year, my senior year of high school, I find myself kind of having to make a shift in what I wanted to do. And throughout public school, I was always into music, and so I decided to try music ed. So I was going to be a band teacher. So I auditioned late for the School of Music. Never really had studied privately, barely got in, and then yeah, and so I was a music ed major for 4.5 years, and until I got to my student teaching and observation, and unfortunately, the truth of the matter is, I started teaching and I realized I didn't really care for kids. so, so I'm like, okay, this isn't going to work out. So I tried computer system engineering for a semester, and I got a zero point 0. True story. I failed every single course I
Oh my
took.
gosh.
And so then I started freaking out. I'm like, okay, I got to graduate with something. So I did my BA in music. So 6.5 years later, about 150 credits, give or take, I had a BA in music. The only thing I was qualified to do was the one thing I didn't want to do. And so then I started doing my deficiency work to do my Master of Science in Technology. And so I was originally a computer graphics major because part of the reason why I did so horrible in school was I was just having a good time playing video games. And so my thought was I would do graphics work.
Quick interruption to the story.
Yeah.
What was the game of choice?
Oh, so so if you can't tell, I'm super old, but it was Final Fantasy VII. So
Let's go. Nice.
yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
I had to ask. I'm like,
No, no,
ooh, what was the game of choice? I was
yeah.
interrupting studies. Many of students can relate. So
Absolutely. And that's not the only one, but that's the one that sticks out. And so I did computer graphics for a while, and my thought was I do graphics for a gaming company, and then I would write the music, and so that would be what differentiates me. Then I realized I didn't have any graphic talent, and then I was a print major for a while, so I did uh, computer to plate, lithography, gravure printing. This only means anything to print people. Uh, Even mess with the four color press. And then I'm like, oh, this is super boring. And then I took a bunch of other classes. And then next thing I knew, I had a master's in technology. So, and so back when I was in school, cybersecurity wasn't a discipline. You couldn't major in it. You didn't have coursework. There was no such thing, right? And so that was just something that you did as an IT professional if you're conscientious. So, you would do things like with NT4 server, it came with IIS turned on by default. You turn that off, right? Because why do you need that service running, et cetera, et cetera. So ultimately, fast track to City of Mesa. I'm an IT manager. I'm reporting to an assistant CIO who was also the CISO. And I basically said, hey, I have bandwidth, I have time, I could take on additional projects and work. And he's like, do you know anything about security? I'm like, sure, I've been in IT forever. At that point, it already felt like forever. And so I wound up helping the CISO, put form and structure around the program at City of Mesa. And then he retired. And so my first full-time gig was as CISO. So that was kind of my trajectory. So
that's amazing, fascinating story. And it's actually kind of cool. And it's just like, and it's going to bleed into the next question kind of perfectly for the education certification experience one, but it's just like, that's kind of wild. That's funny to me. That's funny in a good way. Cause it's just like, so many people think like, I have to go get this degree in cyber. I have to have a traditional degree or learning pipeline to
yeah,
get in, break into this field. And you honestly don't. And that's the thing. It's like, honestly, having the passion for it and just finding what you enjoy doing helps kind of just get into that role kind of almost naturally. So, but
absolutely.
yeah. So, oh man. Well, that leads up to our second question perfectly, which is certifications, experience, and education. Where do you rank the three and why?
So my ranking is experience, educations, and certs. And so, um, but I also think that's dependent on the individual as well. And
Yep.
so I think some individuals do better starting maybe even with certs and education and then working their way in experience. Um, I've always been the kind of person, honestly, that I'm not like super great at any one thing, but I'm really good at a lot of different things. So that even applied to music. So when I was an ed major, I wasn't the best. I was a clarinet major, by the way, and so I wasn't the best clarinetist. But what I was particularly known for was I was good at doubling or playing other instruments, including brass instruments, which is very unusual. So, like if you're a woodwind player, you tend to be good at the other woodwind instruments because they're a similar family. No different than if you're like a trumpet player, you tend to be good at euphonium, trombone, et cetera, et cetera. I was good at all the instruments other than piano. That's a different story. And so the same trait carried over to technology, and so I think that's one of the reasons why I was particularly good at cybersecurity because cyber, deals with layer 1 through 7 plus layer 8 if you're lucky or unfortunate enough to be in management, right?
Mhm.
So your audience will know what layer 8 is, I think. So, but so for me, it was it was experience first, education, because that gave me the well-roundedness that I think in my role in particular I needed, especially with soft skills and other sorts of non-technical training. And then certs. So I have a funny story to share. So like I mentioned, I was going to retire last year from Arizona State retirement.
Yep.
And so I'm looking at jobs. I have a couple of job offers from private sector. That was always my plan, not to fully retire, but just transition to private sector. And there were so many jobs out there that required a CISSP. And I'm like, really? And I'm like, I felt almost, not saying I was too good for it, but I almost felt silly, like having that knuckle under the pressure, getting the certification, even though my last almost 30, at that point, like 29 years of experience didn't count for anything.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, certs are great. I think if you're trying to break in, which we're going to talk about later, but if you're going to try to break in, it's a good way to delineate yourself. And I think it's appropriate, but in my case, I'm like,
Yeah,
so.
I have over almost 30 years of experience. Like, why do I need this one certification just so, yep, I know what I'm doing? Like, but check my job resume, check my history, check all my
Right.
referrals. It's like, oh yeah, he's fantastic. He built this
Oh,
industry from the ground up. It's
and true story, I wish I was making this up. I applied. In fairness, I filled out the application incorrect, so I didn't meet the minimums for the CISSP from years experience, and I got audited on my application. I'm like, of course. So,
Well, I always tell people when it comes into the three things, you have to have two in order to come to the table. So I think when it comes to a lot of folks, just like you said, like I think, or there's a saying in the military, there's an exception to policy for everything. So it's like if you're coming up to a table for like a senior cybersecurity engineer position or a senior cybersecurity analyst position, and that's your first time role, and you're coming out of your bachelor's with a 4-year degree, maybe 1 or 2 certificates, but you lack the experience. If you can be the best candidate and land the interview, do well in the technical interview, swoo and swah the managers and the hiring, however many rounds you have to go through, and be the best candidate, they can bypass, hey, we understand you don't have the experience, but you've proven to us that you understand the concepts, the textbook aspect of this. You have certifications that we need that match this requirement. And they can kind of shoot their shot and say, yep, we're going to grab this individual and throw them into the senior role. Or they can even, sometimes they'll downgrade the role and say, hey, you know what? You don't meet senior, but we'll go ahead. We'll rewrite the role. We'll give you a junior role, but then within X amount of months, we'll bring you up to a senior role as long as you're performing well. So that's the same thing I haven't explained to people, where it's like, it cracks me up that like so many organizations like, oh, we only want a manager that has their CISSP. I'm like, do you
right.
know how many managers you're missing out on, or amazing senior level folks that are looking to move up that just don't hold it because they don't care about certifications, and all because they don't have that one little abbreviation behind their name. They're like, nope, this person's not the right fit for us. And it's like they could have missed 3 or 4 perfect candidates while the job goes vacant for like a year or so. And so it's wild to me.
I probably, given my age, Andrew, I probably know more CISOs who have let their certs lapse than I do that have them at this point. So, anyways,
Well, I think you're spot on. I mean, I know also senior engineers and devs and folks on the back end of stuff where it's like they had a Sec Plus, they had a CEH, they had GSEC or SANS or name whatever certification, but after 5, 6, 10 years, they just let them all lapse. Their company does, unless their company requires them like via through like DoD or some type of thing where you have to have the 8470 compliance to be on a contract or a network. Yeah, they say, yeah, certs are stupid once you're in because you're actually now doing the job. Like you can now show your work history of, yeah, I built out this, I architected this entire network. I did IR response for 6 years doing XYZ on finding this specific threats or malware inside of our network. And it just, I think, trumps and surpasses certificates. And it gets expensive. You go
yeah.
get like 3 or 4 certifications from different vendors that require different annual fees or charges to continuously renew them. It adds up. So, I mean, 100% nail on the head. So, Well, perfect. Well, question 3, I think, is also a fun one, because this one is kind of for our students, also, or anyone else trying to break in. So what are some skills or training that you would recommend for students trying to break into cyber to work on that are maybe graduating or finishing up an internship to really solidify their chances of getting into that first role?
Yeah, so this is something that comes up. So before I got the ASU job again the second time around, I was already adjunct faculty, and so I teach for a program called CHOPS, Cyber Hands-On Program. It helps working adults transition into the cyber field, and at least the program, the way it's structured right now, it basically gives you a high-level understanding of the different roles within a cyber, in the cybersecurity field. And so one of the things that we do is mock interviews and stuff like that. And so it's interesting. So one thing that I think people tend to underestimate is, especially in this day and age, given the market the way it is, and how I do think industry is getting better about their understanding of what entry level actually means. But like,
Yes.
I mean, I literally have seen an entry level position ask for CISSP, and I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
you kidding me?
Me too.
It's stupid, right? And so, but I think people trying to break into the field need to understand cyber is no different than any other job, especially one with high demand, in that you're competing against other candidates. So you need to do things that differentiate yourself from the pool that you're competing against. And so one of the things I recommend is, especially if you don't have experience, doing things like setting up a personal website or a GitHub repository. And this applies not only if it's technical, but like if you're going after a GRC role, for example,
Yep.
upload samples of the work that you've done, either through coursework or self-learning, and side projects, things like, provide a copy or a sample of a security policy or a standard, or upload in your GitHub, you know, whatever malware now, a more technical role, things of that sort. So at least provide to the potential employer examples of the work you've done to make up at least for the lack of experience, because it's amazing how many resumes I see that don't even, I'm going to look up your LinkedIn anyways, but they don't have that information. They don't proactively provide examples of what you're capable of to make up for the lack of experience, if that is the case. So,
Man, I want to run something by you that I've been pitching kind of for some of my mentees. So one thing I recommend for folks trying to break into the field is to legitimately make a YouTube channel. And on on that YouTube channel, what they can do is they can do write-ups. They can show their work on doing like Try Hack Me, Hack the Box. They can have a Medium where they can then post all their write-ups and their findings, how they solved it, their methodology, their mindset. They can walk through, hey, everyone, we're going to do this compromised email today. This is going to be showing off skills such as A, B, C, D. They go through the entire room. And depending on how fast or long they are, because some rooms can take anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour. But what they, in a sense, could do is just like if you're trying to find a good website designer, they say, hey, let me see some of your work. And they show you like a portfolio of all the websites they've made. I'm having some of my mentees do this and say, hey, look, go make a YouTube channel. You don't have to make it public, make it private. If you don't want to be on the web, I get it. But ideally what you can do is when you apply, send them the private link of a playlist of you using Splunk, Metasploit, Elastic, Sentinel-1, CrowdStrike. Name the tool or aspect of what you're trying to get into, and show them that you can, rather than just having that on the resume. Hey, I understand I don't have the on environment experience, but let me show you the last year and a half I've been doing on all these other training platforms doing the work. And it's like, hey, we need just a basic person that's good at Splunk. Well, this person's done Splunk 1 through 3 through Try Hack Me, and they did a really good job. They crafted their own queries. They found all the solutions. They know how to make data tables. Yeah, this is our guy or gal. So, I mean, I think it's a weird aspect of it because it's like, in my time, even when I was applying back in the day, I'm like, I wouldn't give someone a YouTube channel. That's ridiculous.
right.
But I think even now with like, I don't know if folks have talked to you too when it comes into the aspect of like, I have some of my friends right now trying to apply for work, and it's like all they're getting is like they get an interview, but it's all virtual. It's like hey, here's some questions, record yourself answering them, and then we'll get back to you. And so it's like everything's becoming so digital and like not in person. Well, shoot, now if that's the case, might as well kick them a YouTube link to show them all the work you're doing and kind of just get their feedback saying, hey, here's all the stuff you're asking for, and here's proof I can do it.
Yeah, and I think that's a great idea and great recommendation, Andrew. And it's in alignment with what I'm seeing and what I'm sharing as well. So like I have a buddy of mine, granted he's very seasoned, he's more into cloud security. I was talking to him about how he scored his last couple of jobs, and he's like, man, I got my own virtual environment on my laptop. I have I just turn on my Kubernetes environment. I flip around the laptop and like, here's what I've done. Here's my workflows. Blah 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 blah. And he basically just takes over the interview. Now, granted, somebody who's trying to break into the industry, maybe that's a little too aggressive, but the concept's still the same, right?
Yeah.
You're given tangible evidence. You're showing firsthand, and on top of that, if nothing else, not a lot of other people are doing that. So that's just in itself memorable along those lines, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's funny because it's like the folks I talk to, and it's like my way is not the way to get you into cybersecurity. However, the 6 people that I've mentored this last year that have listened to everything I've told them to do are now, they hold certifications. They're in their first cyber role, and they go over and beyond. Hey, on top of this, I also kind of picked up this other LinkedIn learning I did, or hey, on top of what you told me to do, I jumped into like NIST.org and did some of like the SR training they have to get better at GRC. And it's those folks that kind of have that overdrive and over and beyond, I think really get past, like you mentioned, you're competing across a field of usually pretty highly technical folks. I mean, we've seen the layoffs happen this year, CrowdStrike, Microsoft, FANG companies. And to me, even to fathom if one of them went up against me on an interview, I'd be destroyed. Like they worked at a FANG company doing probably the exact same role I'm trying to apply to, and they're just trying to get back into the market so they can start working again. And you got to keep that in mind where you got to imagine you're going against up against Olympian folks in a resume, and you need to be the best candidate. You need to be the top pick. Why are you the one that's going to solve this work problem that they're trying to hire for? And really just sell yourself. So,
yeah.
No, 100%. Well, Lester, another good question for you. This is for our mid to senior level kind of folks watching here on the channel tonight. And when do you think you're ready for that next step in that next journey to drink the Kool-Aid and to become a CISO, or maybe even just in a managerial role? I know a lot of folks I've talked to kind of say that those that look into management that never want to be a manager are the best managers. But what do you think if some folks that do feel that they're ready to make that jump, what are some signs that they're probably ready?
Yeah, and so, well, that's funny you mentioned that because based off of that criteria, maybe I don't make the best manager because I did reach a point where I'm like, yeah, I want to go into management, but from my perspective, and I'll try to answer your question eventually, but my journey was I just I tend to be analytical and I tend to be vocal about my opinion. And so I'm not shy when about sharing that, but I also didn't want to be that guy or person who just would complain and not put their money where their mouth was, so to speak. And so in my mind, my version of putting up or shutting up was to accept the role of being in a managerial position where I had the authority to affect the kind of change that I was complaining about in the first place, right? And so from my perspective, that was my motivation as to why I got into management. But in terms of being ready, I think it's a lot like during major decisions in life that I mean, everybody should prepare, but nobody's going to be truly ready. I mean, at some point, you just got to be like, yeah, good enough. Um, but I think you need to go into it for the right reasons. I will say, and not to suggest, especially in this day and age and the market being the way it is, not saying that money isn't important, but if money is the reason why you're going into management, I do think that's the wrong reason.
Yeah.
I think it might work for the short term, but you're going to wind up being miserable, and money isn't as fulfilling as some other aspects associated with management, in my opinion. I will say this, especially in a field like that you and I belong with cybersecurity, especially if you come up the technical route, making that transition and having the appropriate soft skills, that could be pretty jarring. In my case, I was probably better suited with the soft skills than others because I came up a non-traditional route. Like literally, I've received, academic training on how to educate people. And so there's something to be said for that. And some of those soft skills and those education classes I took actually translated. But if you came up, hardcore, technical track, some of your soft skills may be either pretty immature and or non-existent. You might be a little rough around the edges.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something that you need to take into consider. Look at some training, look at mentoring, especially along those lines to help you navigate what it is to be a successful manager, and then ultimately, at a senior level. So
Yeah, I'm a Cathy extroverted IT guy who loves to talk, who also, funny enough, I kind of like for my military career, I hated not being in the room where all the decisions were being made. And so it's like I tried to climb the ranks as best I could to get into a managerial role or to become a staff sergeant, sergeant first class, not because I wanted the extra pay and the responsibility. I wanted to be in the room to help affect the change. And I think that's deep for me, and it really makes sense to my, because I very much have the same kind of ideology where it's like, there's things I can complain about every single day at work, at all the places I've worked at. But rather than just complaining about it, what I usually do, 99.99% of the time, other than once or twice just griping, I'll complain about it, but then I'll come up with a solution to fix it. And then I petition to my management, hey, I noticed that X was kind of this was an issue, procedure was incorrect, this onboarding's poor. So what I did on my own time or during some downtime at work, I updated it, or here's what I did, or I made this change. I wanted to provide this to you guys, see if this is beneficial. And 9 times out of 10, I've always gotten positive feedback. They say, this is fantastic. Let's get this up to tier 2s or tier 3s to finalize this. And then let's get this updated. This is fantastic. Great work. And I tell people too, when it comes into their first roles, once they've gotten their baselines down, they've learned the tools, they've gotten a good procedure down, they have their casework done, be that coworker that can volunteer for extra tasks. If some tier 2 is looking for someone to help, hey, can I shadow? Can I help with that? And don't be afraid to kind of ask for those challenging projects, because those challenging projects are also what help you stand out against your peers for promotion, for raises, for extra opportunities that come across. And there's always been a saying sometimes in the military, like when you go to basic training, like, hey, keep your head down, stay out of trouble, they'll ignore you. I had a slightly reverse psychology on that, and I made myself known. I like to say, make the phrase, I make waves in a good way. And the story I like to share is there's one day where on a Sunday, you're allowed to do this is back in 2009, you're allowed to do 2 things. You could clean your rifle, or you could write a letter to home. And at some point in time during that, like you did that for 6 hours. That's all you could do. And for like half the day, one of our drill sergeants came in saying, hey, we need 2 people. And I nudged my battle buddy. He shot his arm up. I shot my arm up. We got told to go outside, and like inside our little rock pit, they had tire chippings that spelled out Charlie Company 795. And we hit, all right, go in here, organize the lettering, make sure it's all nice and sharp, dress right dress, yada, yada, yada. Well, 10 minutes later, we hear the door kick open. We hear screaming. We're like, oh man, someone messed up. And as all of our battle buddies are running out the door, we're like, yo man, what happened? What happened? What happened? And I hear someone say, so-and-so was drawing dragons. And they were literally in a doodle book, like drawing dragons, like Dungeons and Dragons. And so it rained the night before, and we had this like moat of water just in a little basin right across from our bay. And the entire company had to go climb into that thing and just start low crawling through it. And me and my buddy get up, and one of our drill sergeants like, no, you guys stay here and organize the tire chippings. That's important. You guys are fine. And I looked at him, I'm like, bro, we just dodged a bullet. And it's simply by volunteering to do that extra little task that can, 1, sometimes keep you out of trouble, but 2, also just make you stand out in a good way. So I share that story because it's slightly funny, and it's just because I know some folks say, get into your role, just stay low for the first year. I'm like, no, don't do that, man. Make noise, be positive, say hi to your coworkers, ask to help. I always tell people like, hey, I got extra cycles. Does anyone need help with anything? And I think that goes a long way. So
Well, I'm living proof of that. I mean, I volunteered and all of a sudden I became a CISO. So, yeah. So, real quick, true story about military. So, I was never in the military, but the closest I ever came to trying was when I was doing my undergrad. And so, my thought was I was going to audition for Army band gig, right? I was under the misconception that if you were in the band, you didn't have to do basic training. So I was practicing for my audition, and then fortunately, I found out beforehand that no, everybody's got to go through basic. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm not sending my tape in. So, yeah. Anyways,
no, that's still cool though. I have a few friends that were in the Army band. They did trumpet and then one did percussion. It's kind of cool. I know here in Arizona, I think there's a National Guard at Papico that's where the band actually drills out of. So it's actually kind of cool. Well, Lester, I got three more questions for you and then we'll wrap this up. But for my next one, this one I think is an important one for folks that are probably more introverted just to sometimes hear. And how important would you say it is for professional networking to be completed in this field? I know I tell folks to join Discord communities and maybe join local meetups or their college hangouts, but is that pretty important or what do you think?
yeah, absolutely. It's important for different reasons at different stages of your career, right? So like everybody's trying to break into cyber. I'm like, you know, if you're not on LinkedIn and if you're not attending local meetups and events, you're doing yourself a disservice because unfortunately, even in this day and age, it's still a lot of who you know, and in some instances, maybe even more important than what you know. Obviously, you need to know the basics in order to be successful. I'm not suggesting that, but a lot of it's just who you know. I mean, that's how I got my first student worker gig because I was still wrapping up my music degree, frankly, um, and so that still holds true, especially for people trying to break in. And then all the way to like old farts like me, where, I was going to retire last year. So one of my goals was I didn't want to have to apply for my next job to transition into the private sector. Now, granted, I had to go through 4 rounds at ASU, but they're a public institution. There's no getting around that. But I had the options, and I wouldn't have had those options from the private sector if it hadn't been for my networking, right? And so I will also say this too. So you are obviously living this right now with all the good work you're doing with your nonprofit and stuff like that. But I do think, especially us older folks or more experienced folks in cybersecurity, we have an unwritten obligation where we need to give back. And so part of our networking should also include building up the next generation of cybersecurity professionals as
Mm-hmm.
well. So
Yep.
it's not, and so you can still derive value, right? So you can build your brand in your network and then, you know, gives you more options on the next things you want to accomplish. But at the same time, we should be also looking at the next generation of professionals, and our networking should also extend to them as well.
No, exactly. I always jokingly tell people like when I'm like in calls like this or like in a group of people, I say, hey, Lester wants to retire. Angie wants to retire at some point. The John Hammonds of the world want to retire. The network chucks. And if we're not leveling up our defenders, our compliance analysts, our pen testers, our CISOs to the level they need to be, that makes us have to work longer. And I don't know about you, Lester, but I want to make sure I can enjoy some cruises and some fun time with the family before I'm too old and brittle. So
Yeah, well, that ship has already sailed for me. I'm starting to feel brittle, but yeah, I want to enjoy what time I have left. So,
well, Lester, this has been so much fun. And I have two last questions for you, which are pretty lack and easy. So first off, thank you so much for coming on the channel. And as always, as a thank you for my guests, I'm going to make sure I send you my link to my awesome store for some GingerHacker swag that you can pick out a cool piece of item and I can get that off to you. So thank you so much for coming by. But when you're not doing cybersecurity, what do you like to do to relax and unplug and have fun?
consistent with my youth, I do enjoy quite a bit computer games, and then it's been a good couple of months, unfortunately, because work and other things have been so crazy. Um, but I still do enjoy music. I listen to a lot of it. I haven't played as much as I have, but the last instrument actually has been bass guitar. So hopefully, if things settle down, I'll be able to pick that up a little bit. And so, but music's has been and always will be important to me. I can't work without it actually either. So, but a lot of that, and then just trying to have a good time and enjoy life and not stress so much about the job. So
No, that's an everyday I feel for a CISO because I know you're good friends with Ryan Murray as well, and I always talk to Ryan. And he's like, just another day putting out fires. I'm like, nice. So,
yeah, yeah.
oh man. Well, last question I have for you, Lester, before I cut you loose and before we say thank you for everyone that stuck around for this interview and this amazing episode of Breaking into Cyber. What's the last piece of advice you'd give someone that is trying to break into cyber right now?
Don't give up. It's a tough market out there. In addition to all the things that you and I discussed on this episode, I would say be persistent and be strategic. And so do the networking. If there's a particular position or role that you're looking for, try to leverage your network. If your network is not large enough, expand that network. Get the inside track if you can. In some instances, you may need to shift your focus where maybe you're not getting the initial SOC analyst role that you want or the GRC analyst role. Try to find other ways into the organization, especially if it's an organization you're focused and wanting to work on. One route is to go the traditional IT help desk route or other options. It's always easier to move laterally, so to speak, both from a hacker perspective as well as career perspective. So maybe you get your initial ingress into the organization and then you move laterally along those lines. So be persistent and always find ways that you have to always be trying to upscale and learn more. And like we talked about, it's not very common or comfortable for a lot of people to market themselves. But if there's ever a time for you to talk about yourself and talk yourself up, it's when you're trying to break in. So
nail on the head. Well, Lester, this was a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for coming on to share this wisdom and knowledge. And everyone watching, make sure you like, comment, subscribe down below. And as always, we'll catch you on the next episode of Breaking into Cyber.